G'day folks, welcome to Van Diemen's Land Model Bench. I'm Daniel Dacey and this is a different kind of review today. We're going to be looking at a DVD tutorial video by a gentleman by the name of Donn Yost. And this one's all about getting a great finish on your model cars.
You realize that 87% of your show points derive from your model car's finish? Hi, my name is Don Yost, probably better known as the old man in the modeling circles. What you're about to learn today is a step-by-step procedure that it took me 46 years to develop. It's easy to follow, and as long as you follow the steps, you're going to end up with shine on your paint just like this.
Just a bit of background on how I came to discover Donn Yost. I decided to have a go at building the Polar Lights Batmobile, which isn't a bad kit. It's got one fatal flaw, which is its decals, but before I got to those, I was having a lot of trouble with getting a nice paint finish on it. It's just, I've never built and finished a car kit in my life, so I was really struggling with it, and so I discovered Donn Yost's website on YouTube, where he talks about some of the techniques he uses. And that led me in turn to his actual Lone Wolf custom painting website, where you can get a bit of a feel for what the man does. And he's very heavily into competition cars, so he has quite a bit to say about that. But he also has some great free tutorials, which I thought were very good. And he also sells some DVDs, and that's hence how I came to have the DVD that we're reviewing today. Don is an experienced painter, and you're going to find that he has some really good things to say, but let's look at the DVD and let's try and break it down a little bit into what is included. So the DVD is sold through his website, and it has a very strong emphasis on making competition grade model cars, and he's divided the DVD up into several chapters. So the first chapter is Introduction, where he's going to talk about the tools you need and the kind of airbrush that he uses to get a good result. And it probably won't be surprising to people that used airbrushes for a while, but he's recommending a single action airbrush. And I can certainly see why that's a great idea for model cars, because you want consistency, and it's much easier to achieve that using a single action airbrush. On the next chapter, he looks at the environment, which is something, again, a lot of modelers do overlook, but it is important. And it's about how clean the environment is that you're working in, and also, of course, things like how well ventilated it is as well. So he discusses that. In the third chapter, he looks at the tools you're going to need. And this is where he starts discussing his particular preference for airbrushes. And the airbrush that he uses and recommends is the Pash Model H single action airbrush, which coincidentally is the very first airbrush series airbrush I ever owned. And I actually still do have one. And I also regard it quite highly. I think though it looks rather crude, and it's been around for like literally decades, it's a very, very good design, and it works extremely well. So that's the tool of his choice, but you could use any airbrush, but I think a single action is probably preferable. The next chapter is talking about preparation, which, as we all know as modelers, is absolutely critical. But when you're doing cars and you want those high gloss finishes, preparation really is going to make or break the kit. So he talks about how you prepare the model and sand it and prime it. Now, the technique he uses for priming is a little bit different to what I would use, and probably most modelers use, but the principle's there, so you can apply it with whatever your preferred primer is. That's another thing to point out while we're just going through these chapters. Don has some very particular techniques that he uses that he knows that work, and so this video is focusing on what he does, not necessarily what you could do. That's really important when you watch this video, because you've got to understand that he's relaying his experiences, and he's not attempting to try and be a jack of all trades and show you every possible variation of techniques that might work. Going on to really the meat and potatoes chapter is the proper application. This is where he talks about mixing paints and applying coats onto the body shell of the car. Now, Don is a big fan of Testa's Model Master enamel paints, and I can certainly understand why. They're a very good enamel paint brand, and they have a really good, excellent selection of gloss paints. One of the challenges with working with acrylic paint is it doesn't really work very well as a gloss. It looks great as a semi or like a light sheen. It looks excellent as a matte paint, but it doesn't quite work as well in a gloss. And certainly I can understand why Don's chosen to go with the Testis enamel. As you'll see in some videos I'm going to put up shortly, I elected to go with a lacquer-based paint, but the techniques that Don uses with the enamels would be equally applicable there. Finally, in the closing segment of the video, Don talks a bit about a summary of the techniques that he's shown you and the importance of them. And he does go into a little bit of politics, I guess I would call it, where he talks a bit about model show competition judging, something I have absolutely no idea about because I've never been involved in any of those sort of competitions. But it is obviously a button you can push with Don, and he's quite passionate about it. I'm not sure it really needed to be in this video, to be honest, because many modelers watching this video will not be putting their models into competitions. But to be fair, he does sort of talk about making competition grade models, so I guess he felt that he wanted to put his 2 bobs worth in there. Speaking of that, let's talk about the actual approach that Don takes. Don has a fairly strong personality, and it's something that's going to possibly rub some people the wrong way. He can sound a little bit preachy in some of his video. I don't think Don's intending to be at all. I think he's trying to be as clear and as instructional in his content as he can be, but sometimes that may come across that way. I personally had no problem with it, and I felt that he was making an effort to be very methodical and very thorough in his introductions. And that's also worth noting with this video. If you're not a car modeler by default, then I think this video, or you're just getting into the hobby and you want to start by building model car kits, I think this video's got a lot to offer you because it's going to give you some very basic techniques that are going to work. One of the claims that Don makes in this video is that it in fact will dramatically improve your results. I think he said something like you'll get an 80% better improvement in your results. I'm not sure how you measure that, but I'm not going to argue with him either because I applied his techniques. Granted, I did modify them only slightly to work with the materials that I had. I did use the same airbrush as what he uses in the video, and I did use the same basic technique for applying the paint, and I did indeed see a substantial improvement in the quality of the result that I got on the model. So for me at least, this video was certainly worthwhile because I got the results that I was looking for, and I also learned some of the techniques. Now, one of the things I noticed when watching this video, I have my closest friend from school went into the auto trade and was a spray painter by trade, and I would hang out at the workshop with him, and I noticed that really the techniques that Don's using are exactly the same techniques that you would use in the real world with real cars. So really all he's done is taken those sort of approaches about the environment and the tools and the application, and he's, if you like, scaled them down to a model car. And I think that's why his techniques work so well. The other thing that he's very big on, which is equally a good technique, is that he is consistent. So he's found a technique that works for him and he applies it over and over again with every project that he starts. For some of us, that may not be what we want to do because for me anyway, part of the hobby is the fun of experimenting with different techniques and things like that. But I can absolutely get what he's saying. And I would have to agree with his claim in this video that if you apply his techniques, you will get a really good result, and it will be substantially better than perhaps what you've achieved in the past. I can't really argue with that. So overall, I think the video has a lot to offer. Speaking of the technical quality of the video, the chapter layout is good. There are summaries at the end of each chapter, which is nice to see. As I said, Don's presentation style is very thorough, so you will cover all the techniques. The video quality isn't quite as good. I suspect it's a fairly old DVD or video. I think it was probably shot on something like standard definition, something like 720. So it's not high definition. So if you put it on a high quality computer monitor or onto your TV, if you've got a more recent TV, you will notice that it's not quite the quality you're used to. But that doesn't detract at all from the instructional side of this video. The video is still very clear in that respect. You can still definitely get the idea of what the technique is and how to apply it and why you want to do it. So if you look at it from perspective of it being a tutorial, an instructional video, it achieves its goal and it hasn't aged at all. You'll just notice that the video quality is not quite what we expect these days with HD, but I think that's really a fairly minor issue. Don sells this video through his own website, so you can go to his website, and I'll put a link in the description for this video review for you to have a look at. And you can go there and order the video. It's reasonably priced. Of course, I'm in Australia, so I had to pay the postage, which is always fairly horrendous from the United States. But nonetheless, I ordered it, and it came here in a more than reasonable time, so I'm sure that Don had processed the order quite quickly once he received it, so that was all good. And it came in packaging that was fine for the trip over, so there was no dramas there at all either. So overall, let's have a look at my overall judgment on this video. So from the likes perspective, I like the fact that Don makes no assumptions about your modelling skills. So if you're a beginner, you'll be comfortable with this video. If you've got some experience, you might pick up a few tips as you go, and he even mentions that. He has a checklist at the end of each chapter. I think that's a really good instructional. I'm a teacher by trade as well as IT, so I appreciate that the fact that he did that summary. That's a really important part of learning something, so it was good that you had that checklist there. He does very thoroughly explain his techniques and why he uses them. He claims he will improve your finish, and I think for the average modeller, even those perhaps that are doing model cars and have done for some time, there is some merit in that claim. I think if you apply his technique, you should see a very pleasing result. He does include some showcase of some of the models that he's done over the years, so you can get a bit of a feel right up front about what you should be aiming for or expecting, hopefully, to get out of this video as a conclusion for it. And I think his video is fairly priced given the content. So there's a little bit of preaching in there as far as like the competition judges and things like that, which I don't think needed to be there, quite honestly. But the bulk of the video is exactly what it says on the cover and what you've paid for, so no complaints there. On the dislike side of it, if you like, the video quality is okay, but it's not brilliant, but it still gets the job done. Don works to a technique, and that's fine. He worked something that works for him, and he applies it. Don't get this video if you're expecting to see 2 or 3 different ways to get a great finish on your car, because that's not what this guy is about. He has one technique, it works for him, and he explains it very thoroughly and methodically to you in this video. If you don't want that kind of video, don't get this one. If you're willing to give it a go and try the techniques that he shows you and use the same sort of tools that he shows you, and then if you like that, adapt it however you like. Like for example, I didn't use enamel paint in this particular project I was working on. I used lacquer, but I used exactly the same techniques. And I've got to say, I was a little bit horrified to start with because I'm spraying this lacquer paint at quite a large quantity of it out there. And lacquer paints for model kits are not cheap, but I can't argue with the fact that the technique worked, and it did give me a really good finish on the kit straight off the gun. So if you're willing to give it a go and you're willing to just buy the products and try it, that's fine. If you only have a double action airbrush as well, this video is probably going to be a little bit frustrating for you because the techniques he uses are around using a single action airbrush. I'm not saying you can't replicate them with a double action, but you'll need to be experienced with using an airbrush for that to be possible. If you get this video and you're a beginner and the first airbrush you've bought is a double action airbrush, you could be a little bit frustrated with this video because it's not really going to help you understand how to use that double action airbrush to get the kind of results he's doing, because he's not ever using a double action airbrush in any of this video. It's all single action airbrush. That said, he's picked a very common airbrush, and he's picked one that you can usually get on various eBay and other places secondhand really cheap. So again, if you're willing to invest in this video, chances are you could probably pick up a secondhand airbrush like the one he uses in the video for not much more money. So it might be something to consider. Overall though, I'm actually pretty happy with this video. I felt that he did a good job of explaining his technique. I didn't find it was too long. And overall, it definitely helped with my understanding of how to paint a model car, which is, in the end of the day, exactly the reason that I ordered it. So if you're interested in learning more about how to paint model cars, I can recommend this video to you. You can find out more about this video and some other videos that Don has produced on his website. I'll include a link to his website in the description. And that's about all I've got to say for this review. Hope you found it useful, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.